I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This interview is with Georgie Newbery, who runs Common Farm Flowers down in Somerset. Georgie sells British grown cut flowers year round via her website, and she also does wedding flowers. And she often gives talks and demonstrations, and I've been to one and it was brilliant, just really inspiring. And she also runs workshops at her flower farm. So I've been ordering bouquets from Georgie, I think pretty much since she opened, and although I've sadly never been the recipient of one, the people that have received them have sent me photos and they're always stunning. She's also an author of The Flower Farmer's Year and Grow Your Own Wedding Flowers, and she's just really an all-round cut flower guru. And she also gardens naturally without chemicals and takes a laid-back approach to pests, which is pretty impressive for a commercial operation. I started by asking her about the setup down in Somerset. Can you explain a little bit about your plot and why what you're doing and how you're doing it is important?
Well, our plot is a 7-acre plot, which when we came here 15 years ago was completely empty. It had been used for fattening cattle, so it was seeded with very thick ryegrass, really good for feeding cattle, but not very good for anything else. And our dream was to live in a sort of eco-paradise with bees and butterflies and enormous amounts of birds and so on. And so we thought that the flower farm would be a way to make a living, a modest living. I don't think I'll ever retire a millionaire from it, but a modest living and live with a very, very green garden at the same time. That was the general idea. In fact, we first of all decided, we thought we were going to be sort of straightforward market gardeners, but the flower farm came about because somebody sent me a bunch of flowers through the post at a point when I was beginning to despair slightly and thinking, I don't know, how am I going to make a living? And it was a real light bulb moment, and I thought, oh, that's fantastic. I will grow flowers and sell them because I could do it from home. I had very small children at the time, so it suited me very well. Anybody who's been on a workshop here will know that I always talk about being able to do things in 20-minute increments. And flower farming is a classic job that you can do in 20-minute increments. Mm. So that's how the flower farm came about. It's a 7-acre plot, but still about half of it is wild and is kept very much wild. So we've got orchards, we've got banks of willow trees, we've got about half a mile of hedging that we put in as 30-inch whips when we got here, all native hedging, which is now 20 foot high and 10 foot wide. Wow. And is amazingly full of wildlife. It is extraordinary. And the cut flower patches are very badly laid out. If you were going to be much more commercial than we are, you would lay out your cut flower arrangements in such a way that you only had to go to one place to cut everything, and you'd have a tap in every place where you wanted to cut everything, instead of which we have 5 smallish cutting patches interspersed with patches of wild meadows and orchards and so on, so that there is room for the wildlife to flourish between the cut flower zones, if you like. And that is really the point of the exercise, is to make the wild very successful and also make enough money to keep it going at the same time.
Okay. So is it true? I mean, a lot of people say have faith, stay patient, and eventually the ecosystem will establish in such a way that you don't really have a proliferation of any particular type of pest. Have you found that?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I can't sort of insist on it more. This year, I have never seen greenfly like it. I'm sure everybody's been complaining about the greenfly. And it was all over the roses, like explosion of greenfly on the roses. And I knew from experience that all I had to do was hold my breath. As the roses budded up, the greenfly got fatter and fatter and fatter and more and more of them. And duly, a fortnight later, along come the ladybirds. And they have stripped every single one. And the roses are now completely greenfly free. And I haven't sprayed them with soap solution. I haven't done anything to them. I've not, in the olden days, I used to squeeze them off. I have not done none of that. I've left everything, and the ladybirds have done their jobs. And also this year, another kind of huge light bulb moment for us. We were burgled in January.
Oh, no.
And the burglars took the hedge trimmer.
Oh.
And of course, Fabrizio, he won't have any old hedge trimmer from the nearest shop. He has to have a particularly special hedge trimmer. So it took too long to get the special hedge trimmer. So we didn't trim any of the hedges this year, not one. And as a result, we have got probably over maybe 2.5 foot more cover per hedge than we had before. And we have had an explosion of birds. I mean, absolutely explosion of bird life. We usually have masses and masses of magpies, and I know they take some of the baby birds. But this year, you're watching the baby birds. The magpies don't stand a chance. And the baby birds are incredible. And they, as well as the ladybirds, have been mowing the roses. Anything that's been covered in black fly or green fly, the birds, you just watch them working them. It's amazing. And a small goldfinch, a baby goldfinch, at the moment they're about less than half the length of their parents. So they're tiny. They're like absolutely tiny. And they are already ganging up. You know how goldfinches go around in huge gangs? And these little baby goldfinches are already ganging up, and they are working the flower farm really, really effectively. It's absolutely amazing. And we do have slugs, but, you know, when I'm working the dahlia patch, there are jackdaws just come along behind me, and I pick up the slugs out of the bed, fling them over my shoulder, and the jackdaw thanks very much. And then I do it again. The jackdaw goes, thanks very much.
That's fantastic.
I mean, it's really, really amazing. I always said that it would take about 10 years to get to really organic, if you like. So in that 10-year period, you will lose things to pest and disease. But we've now been here 15 years, and I know I sound ridiculous, but it is absolutely astonishing. The balance and the wildlife working the land with us. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
As I say, a lot of people say that, but actually having that leap of faith is another matter. So it's lovely to hear that you've done it, and it just keeps on getting better.
It is really hard. This year's thing, I have a real thing about people spraying their lawns for leather jackets, which I totally understand. My mother, you know, she's a great sprayer of lawns, and she always gets the moss man in to get rid of the moss, because that's her generation, and she has she doesn't have very much lawn, but it's perfect. I would never, ever spray a lawn, and I'm standing in my studio now, looking out the window, and half an hour ago, when it was raining, there was a parliament of rooks working the lawn, and then along come the woodpeckers, and they work the lawn. They're hungry. We've got thrushes and blackbirds on another patch of grass, and they've worked out their own territories, and so the thrushes and the blackbirds work one bit, and the corvids and the woodpeckers work another bit. And it's brilliant to watch. I mean, it's really sort of exciting. And if I had sprayed my lawns, then those poor old birds, we've got a population explosion of birds because we didn't cut the hedges. So what would they have to eat?
Yeah, no, it's very true. Yeah. I love the idea of the gangster goldfinches.
Yeah, they are. They really... in French, they're called a voliere of goldfinches, which is a flight of goldfinch. But of course, in the French for burglar, for thief, or something being stolen is voler. So I think it's a thievery of goldfinches.
Yeah,
they're just so naughty.
Probably right. I mean, I got your book. So, I mean, I love the idea, obviously, of what you're doing, but I got your book when it came out in 2014. That was the Flower Farmer's Year. And in it, you rail a bit against our love affair with imported and chemically treated cut flowers. And I just wondered, I was kind of flicking through it again yesterday, and I wondered how much you feel that like things have changed in the 5 years since you wrote that book with regards to the cut flower industry.
There's been a huge sea change in public opinion, and it's amazing. The British flowers movement has really taken off. I think that there's an organisation called Flowers from the Farm, and I think they now have 400 odd members from a standing start. And those are all small flower farms. I mean, not huge industrial organisations. A lot of them are tiny backyard gardeners. But to have at least 400 people in this country growing flowers with the objective of selling some of them is, I think, a huge leap from where we were when we started out in 2010. And I think what's fantastic is that the big names in the floristry industry have really dived onto the idea and are really pushing it. So people like Shane Connolly and Simon Lycett and, the famous florists are really encouraging and really joining in with the idea that we grow really wonderful quality flowers in the UK, which are not the same as those imported from the rest of the world because they're lighter, fresher. They won't travel out of water, which makes them difficult to sell if you're a big international flower business. And so things like the Ami-Majus and all the lovely umbellifers and just the unusual flowers that wouldn't necessarily travel terribly well from South America or Africa are doing really, really well. And the knock-on effect of that is the fact that, of course, the gardening world is becoming very conscious of its habitual use of plastic, and so has the floristry world become very conscious of its habitual use of plastic. So along with a consciousness that actually there are fantastic flowers grown in the UK available year-round, let's use them without using not just chemicals, but let's not use any floral foam. And so the whole movement has become much more integrated, if you like, which is absolutely brilliant, I think.
And what are some of the worst offenders that you could buy, and why are they particularly bad?
Well, I think it's the whole process. Mm-hmm. So, for example, not everybody does this, but there are big flower farms in South America, for example, where the roses are grown in tunnels, and the plastic on those tunnels is changed relatively frequently, depending on the light levels and the time of year, which is already a lot of plastic to be changed. And then the people who work there, and this is not every single flower farm, but there are some places where this is how it works. The people who work there work in the tunnels, and of course they're boiling hot. They're like 40 plus degrees, boiling hot. And so the people are supposed to be wearing protective clothing because the air is a miasma of fungicide and other chemicals to keep the roses perfect. But of course they don't necessarily wear all the protective clothing because they're already boiling hot. And it's boring and annoying, and there isn't necessarily somebody making sure they wear a mask and all of that stuff. So those people then are living in a miasma of chemicals. They cut the roses, and they cut them in bunches of 50, which are then sent into a shed, which is kept very, very cold. So the people who work in the shed are wrapped up as if they're in the North Pole and are also supposed to be wearing masks because they're working a lot with more fungicide. And so what they then do is they take these bunches of roses, 50 of them at a time, and they dunk them head first in fungicide. So the people doing this are walking around ankle deep in fungicide. I mean, this is not every rose, obviously, but a lot of it is this case. That you then buy roses that have been dunked in fungicide head first, and they are then pulsed with various different chemicals, including silver nitrate, which is the traditional way of making flowers last longer, because what silver nitrate does is it prevents the flower from producing ethylene, which is the ripening gas that you get from bananas and tomatoes and things. It's the same process. And if you prevent the flower from producing that gas, then it will last longer. So your poor old rose has been dunked head first in fungicide, and then it's treated with silver nitrate, and then it is packed up and sent off on its way. Often, not always, there are incredible growers in the world, so I'm not saying everybody's the same, but nevertheless, there are growers or international flower dealers who fly these boxes of very highly dealt with chemical-treated roses across the world in aeroplanes, which then fly back to their home country empty.
Oh, my God.
And
that's outrageous.
And there are great growers who fly, make sure that they use the holds of planes that then have people upstairs. And so there are great growers, and I would never give you a name of anybody, but there's a fantastic book which you can read called Gilding the Lily. I can't remember the name of the author, but it is the story of the international cut flower trade, and it is mesmerizing, absolutely mesmerizing. And that's where I get this story of the dunking of the roses. So when the roses finally end up on your kitchen table a week or two later, You know when they half open, and the reason they only half open, they will never open properly, is because they've been over-treated.